When you got to the Yankees in '78, what was your first indoctrination to the Yankee-Red Sox rivalry?
You know, Catfish and the veteran guys grabbed me and they said, hey, look, this is going to be different than any place you've ever played. Chicago, I played with the White Sox for 5 years and then a year with Pittsburgh, and then I became a free agent and ended up signing with the Yankees. And I remember Catfish and a few of the other guys, Thurman and the vets. Sparky Lyle kind of took me under his wing, the great reliever, Sparky Lyle. And he had won the Cy Young Award in '77, so that tells you what kind of a relief pitcher he and kind of year he had with the Yankees when they won it in '77. So they all took me kind of under their wing and said, hey, look, you're in New York now, and they kind of laid out what the ropes were going to be like and how tough it was going to be and how much tougher the press was there than any place else that I'd ever played. And boy, they were right, but it helped having those guys, kind of lead me along, how to act and who to watch out for and what just what you need to do. So that torch was passed to me by those guys.
And then the Red Sox, it just naturally flowed when you took them on, or did somebody else sit you down, or you just already knew going in that this was something that was different than any other game you'd be playing in pinstripes? Rich.
Well, no, it was one of the things that dealing with playing in New York was the Red Sox Yankees, rivalry, and it was real. We hated those guys; they hated us. The fans really fueled, that rivalry, and there was no love lost between us and the Red Sox, but there was a mutual respect, absolutely, of how great those Red Sox teams were back in the '70s. The division, they say how tough it is now. Hey, let me tell you something. That division back in the '70s and all through the '80s, let me tell you, that was the toughest. It was the Beast of the East, is what they called it, and it was a badass division at that time. And all the teams were great. Maybe they lacked a pitcher here or a pitcher there. That was really the only difference between the teams was probably in the pitching department.
And in the middle of your first season for the Yankees, Billy Martin gets fired with the team being 10 games over 500. What in the world was happening in the clubhouse then, Goose?
Well, at never a dull moment. It was the toughest place that I had ever been. And, boy, I tell you, I'm glad I had 6 years in before I got to there, because I don't know mentally if I could have taken it. But, what was amazing about those teams in the '77 and '78 Yankees, when they won back-to-back championships, was how these guys handled all of the distractions off of the field and were able to really perform the way they did on the field with all the distractions. But they had a way of, those were veteran teams. The greatest teams that I ever had the privilege of playing on was that '78 team, and I didn't get there until '78. And, I ended up taking Sparky's job, Rich, and they gave it to me on a silver platter, and I proceeded to, really just basically suck. And the harder I tried, the worse I got. And those 14 games that we ended up being out, I believe late July or mid-July or into August even, when we were 14 games out, and then we ended up putting on coming back, and I started pitching well and started digging us out of that hole. And then we ended up catching the Red Sox and forcing that one-game playoff. So it was my doing that, I said we would have never, on our rings, we ended up repeating as world champions, and that '78 playoff game with the Red Sox was the biggest, by far the biggest game that I had ever been in up to that point, and I had never been in a game since then of that kind of magnitude. Red Sox, Yankees, you couldn't have scripted it any better, but we ended up repeating, and on our rings, Mr. Steinbrenner put the greatest comeback in history, because no one has ever come back 14 games out at that late a date. And And it would have never been the greatest comeback in history if I hadn't dug us that deep hole to begin with.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on radio stations across the country and audience.
If you like that, download our app. Please, just if it's a memory thing, just delete other apps. You don't need those apps. This app, the Rich Eisen Show app, you need that.